So this week we're talking about the different types of scientific investigation. Last week we talked about the scientific method and the steps that you would take. That is one of the types of the investigations. There are 4 or 5 different kinds, and some of the investigations you cannot do just by testing it. For example, if you were talking about things in outer space and you wanted to test something about the sun, you can't just go test it. So instead, scientists have developed other things. For example, you have models. Or the 5 types of scientific investigations, you have models. Okay? The sun is one of those. We cannot go to the sun. We can't do a lot of testing on the sun, but we have a model of the sun. A model is a smaller representation of something. Some of you may have built model cars or model boats, or you may have seen different things like Matchbox cars and stuff like that. But these are all models. They're smaller versions of large objects that people cannot really go and test and observe. Okay. Another one is simulations. A simulation is something that you practice. Usually it's kind of an online thing. One of the things I can always remember is, have you ever seen the people that look like they're driving a plane, an airplane or something like that, and they have all these screens around them, and they're trying to land the plane, and they're sitting there, and they're doing everything. Are they actually in the plane? No, because it's practice. A simulation is practice. You guys have probably done a lot of simulators when it comes to video games and things like that. The reason you can't do some of these things is because if you mess up, it's going to cost a lot of money, or it may die, or it might be too dangerous. So, like pilots, they practice. How many times has your dad done the simulators where he practices for flying? Yeah, 3 months. That's all he does is just practice before he can actually get into the plane. Another one is just straight up observations. You can only observe some things. Some things you can't actually test and see. For example, Venus. How many of us have gone to Venus? How many scientists, astronauts have been there to test things? And you can't. So what do? We just watch it. We just sit back and we look at it, we study it, we observe it. That's what an observation is. Another one is a field study. A field study is to go out and actually study something in the field. For example, paleontologists go out and they find dinosaur bones. They actually go out into the field and they actually study the bones, and they actually see where it comes from, and they check the surrounding areas and all that kind of stuff. And of course, finally, this is the one we talked about last week, is a controlled experiment. A controlled experiment is actually testing something. Okay? You're controlling what you're testing. We controlled the balls that would fall. We would control all of the size of the balls and what time we drop the balls and what height and all that kind of stuff. That's a controlled experiment. So when it comes to these different types of scientific investigation, these are the 5 that scientists use. In class here, we will look at some models. We will have some, like, for example, the model of a globe. Right? We were just talking about that in social studies. That is something that we can study, smaller version of the larger one, because we can't study the whole Earth at once, but we can study a globe because it's a smaller model. The simulations is the practices, like the virtual reality and that kind of stuff. Observation is just being able to sit and watch it, to look at it, to see what happens. Okay? Field study is actually going somewhere to study something in that particular area. Okay, if I wanted to study the eating habits of a rhinoceros, I can't do that in my backyard. I have to go out in the field and I have to study it there. And finally, a controlled experiment is something that you can kind of do in the lab, where you control all of the variables, control all of the parts of the experiment to test it and see if something's working right or not. Okay?